are many video games which demand tens or hundreds of hours of emotional and physical investment. So when the final moments don't live up to that build-up, it creates a bit of a dissonance. No matter how incredible the platformer, RPG, or Souls-like is up until that point, a weak final boss or an underwhelming conclusion can definitely dilute the entire experience. Having said that, there's no question that certain games did peak too soon, and that's the kind of thing we're looking at in this list. So do let me know what you reckon, otherwise let's crack in. But again, we are talking about video game endings, so beware, spoilers lie ahead. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are the 10 most anticlimactic video game endings ever.
Want to stay safe online and save big? Well, you can. Right now, you can get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card. And all you've got to do is click the link in the description below or on this QR code that should be right down here in this video to get signed up with this great deal right now.
Number 10, Rage. Set in a post-apocalyptic future, Rage follows a soldier called Nicholas Rain, who emerges from a century-long hibernation. After being targeted by an evil organization called the Authority, Nicholas realizes he's the only person who can awaken the rest of humanity. Developed by id Software, you'd expect Rage to have similarities to the company's other properties like Doom and Quake. However, the first-person shooter feels more akin to like a Fallout or a Mad Max, implementing an open-world racing structure and action RPG mechanics. There's also more of a focus on exploration, as well as vehicle combat, side missions, and crafting, all of which are handled really beautifully. But if there's one department where Rage does drop the ball, it's the ending, or rather, the lack thereof. The final mission involves Nicholas activating a satellite uplink to awaken mankind. Although it would be fitting to face a terrifying boss before or after this happens, Rage goes against the grain by having Nicholas throw down with nobody. Considering how powerful the Authority is, you'd expect them to have some kind of powerhouse robot or mutant monster protecting the one thing that secures their grip on the world, but after blasting a few standard enemies and flipping a couple of switches, Nicholas will find he has, in fact, already defeated the malevolent empire. Well done. Number 9, 12 Minutes. In Annapurna's mind-bending title, a police officer breaks into a couple's home and accuses the woman of murdering her father. This argument leads to a scuffle, which concludes with the invader killing your character, the husband. You wake up 12 minutes prior and realize you're trapped in a time loop. In order to stop time from resetting over and over, you need to delve into the husband's past and learn about his connection with the cop. After uncovering enough clues, you prove that the officer's accusations are false, causing him to apologize for repeatedly murdering you. As you embrace your wife, the story seemingly concludes, with every aspect of the plot tied up neatly. But if you know anything about 12 Minutes, it's probably something about the ending, and it gets pretty messed up, and there's actually more to it than that, somewhat unfortunately. Instead of watching the credits, the next scene cuts to 12 minutes prior, meaning time has reset again. After discovering more clues, it's ultimately revealed that everything you've experienced is a mental projection that you created out of guilt, or, this is a huge spoiler, but you might want to know anyway, especially if you're not going to play the game, murdering your father, and, wait for it, your wife is revealed to be your half-sister, meaning you killed her father as well. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with a fake-out, but fake-outs only work if the actual ending is better than the false one. The red herring climax tied up all the loose ends so well that the actual conclusion kinda ruined it. Number 8, Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 3 follows a Mohawk British warrior called Connor, who joins the Order of Assassins, hoping to find his mother's murderer, a Templar called Charles Lee. Based on Charles' actions, it's no surprise to learn that he's the final boss. With that said, Lee is not an interesting antagonist. When he's not beating up kids or burning the locals, he's spouting villain monologues and sucking up to his superiors. As such, it would have been more satisfying if the showdown was against the Templar leader, who also happens to be Connor's father, Haytham Kenway. The player takes control of Haytham for the first 3 hours, so you have a deep understanding of how this guy thinks. Despite his arrogance, he does believe he's doing the right thing and doesn't give in to his base urges, unlike Lee. story. It's also apparent that Haytham cared about Connor's mother a lot and wants what's best for his child, despite being at odds with him. Due to their complex history, watching Connor fight Haytham to the death in the penultimate chapter is genuinely riveting. Despite Haytham's crimes, you feel bad for Connor when he's forced to execute his father, rendering himself an orphan. Even though this would have been the perfect way to end the game, the main campaign continues with Connor hunting down Charles Lee. But instead of facing Lee in a bombastic duel, you just chase him for like a minute before stabbing him to death in a cutscene. If the order of how Connor battles Kenway and Lee was reversed, the ending would have been much better, but it wasn't. Number 7. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor isn't just an incredible Lord of the Rings adaptation, it's also a phenomenal war game in its own right. Monolith's action-adventure title offers fluid combat, solid performances, and excellent mechanics in both stealth and parkour. Of course, the highest praise goes to the Nemesis system, which allows enemies to remember past encounters with the hero, urging them to pursue him. Shadow of Mordor's crammed with so much innovation, it feels like the developers ran out of ideas when they were devising the final boss, that being the Black Hand of Sauron. Instead of fighting Sauron's lead captain head-on, the Black Hand is defeated after taking part in a 30-second QuickTime event. You know, that thing that gamers love? This so-called battle drew a lot of criticism, which is why fans hoped it would be remedied in the expansion, The Bright Lord. To be fair, the DLC was shaping up to have a cinematic showdown, since you squared off against Sauron himself. Not only that, you play as the Forger of the One Ring, Celebrimbor. Because Celebrimbor wields the One Ring during this bout, players expected it to be an all-out battle, where the Elven Smith utilizes his divine powers. Instead, the final fight heavily restricts the gameplay, nullifying the tools you spent ages mastering, which is less fun. Number 6. Every Golden Sun game. Golden Sun follows a group of young magic users called adepts who intend to bring balance to the world through the ancient art of alchemy. Even though Camelot's fantasy trilogy is fantastic, each entry does have a weak epilogue, which sours the gaming experience. The original cuts to credits halfway through the story, giving players no indication the game was a two-parter. Then there's Golden Sun: The Lost Age, which has a more traditional outcome, but it is still disappointing since you never fought the main villain Alex. Also, it's revealed in the last few moments that the person who's been pulling the strings all along was the Wise One, a character that you haven't seen since the beginning of the first game. Since the Wise One hasn't been mentioned for like 50 hours, it's easy to forget about him. Despite setting everything in motion, you never fight the Wise One either. Instead, the final boss is a draconified version of the hero's parents, which is weird. Sadly, the closing chapter of the series, Golden Sun: Dark Dawn, maintains that WTF ending tradition. After defeating the final boss, our heroes return home only to see an ominous vortex in the sky. Although it's unclear what this portal signifies, it was assumed that its purpose would be revealed in the sequel. However, Golden Sun 4 never came to part, which makes Dark Dawn's unresolved cliffhanger even more infuriating. Number 5. Gears of War 3. Gears of War follows soldier Marcus Phoenix and his platoon blasting their way through swarms of mutants called the Locust Horde. In the third outing, the squad locate the Horde Queen, Mira. Believing her death will cause the collapse of the Locusts, Marcus's crew do everything in their power to destroy her. Upon coming face to face with the Queen, they're shocked to learn that Mira is human. Although that could have come across as a gimmicky twist, the revelation actually has potential if it's handled correctly. So why did Mira turn on humanity? What reason could she have not just to join her enemy, but to lead them against her own people? Those are great questions, and they're great questions which the game has no answer to. By the time Gears of War 3 rolls credits, players will have as little understanding of who Mira is as when they first met her. Now, it's worth remembering Mira's backstory is explained in the comic The Rise of RAAM and the novels The Slab and Aspho Fields. But if the creators spent so much time and effort developing Mira's backstory, why didn't they put it in the game? Number 4. Mortal Kombat 1. Mortal Kombat's narrative has become such a mess, it was refreshing when the 12th installment started fresh, simplifying or removing convoluted aspects from the plot. While working through Mortal Kombat 1's story mode, it feels like NetherRealm Studios did get heaps of it right. There's a heavy focus on the characterization, improvements to the lore, and more nuanced dilemmas. Sadly, things fall apart during the third act when it's revealed the combatant who's been masterminding the most recent conflict is Titan Shang Tsung, the same antagonist from Mortal Kombat 11's DLC. Mortal Kombat 1 was the perfect opportunity to break away from the original canon, so it was jarring jarring to see the old lore just being crammed into the reboot at the last minute. What's worse is everything in the climax is rushed. Once Titan Shang is defeated, everything is wrapped up in like 3 minutes, with several major events occurring off-screen. For the final insult, a post-credits scene indicates that the DLC's antagonist will be Havoc, a completely generic villain up until this point. Rather than remedying these problems, the DLC made things worse, since it was overpriced and offered terrible characterization and a paper-thin plot. Looking back, it's no great surprise that the next planned expansion ended up getting cancelled. Number 3. ChronoCross. Even though ChronoCross didn't garner the same legacy as Chrono Trigger, the sequel is almost as good as its predecessor. However, the climax is all over the place. Though Cross deals with a separate story for the most part, the final act crowbars in crucial aspects of the first game, which feels very forced. Although Chrono Trigger's big bad is constantly looming in the background, the overarching villain this time around, the Time Devourer, shows up at the 11th hour with limited foreshadowing, so there's not really any emotional investment. But since this adversary is a cosmic force that threatens the space-time continuum, you'd expect that the final assault is going to be sensational. And with up to 45 allies in your party at this point, you're hoping to have an extensive and deeply emotional conclusion. But not only is the battle generic, you actually can't watch the ending unless you defeat the Time Devourer in a very specific way. Basically, you need to strike the boss with a specific weapon and specific attacks in an exact order. If the sequence is interrupted in any way, you have to start from scratch. However, there's little indication how to defeat the Devourer correctly, so a lot of players had to settle for the non-existent ending. Even if you do unlock that true ending, there's minimal closure because there's no mention of what happens to the alternate worlds and timelines. On top of that, there isn't any emotional arc for the dozens upon dozens of heroes, and that includes the protagonist. Number 2. South Park: The Fractured Butthole. In South Park: The Fractured Butthole, the local kids form rival superhero factions, hoping to launch a successful movie franchise. Amid escalating battles and gas-induced time travel, the new kid uncovers a conspiracy that threatens the town's future. Although the juvenile RPG is as silly as you'd expect it to be, it knows when to up the stakes, especially when it comes to the bosses, and for some reason these South Park RPGs are way better than they have any right to be. Throughout the preposterous adventure, the new kids party tangle with epic foes like an elder god, a screen-filling mutant, and of course Morgan Freeman. As the conflicts spiral out of control and alternate timelines are introduced, it seems like our heroes are going to be duking it out with an uber villain. Instead, the final fight is against Mitch Connor, aka the alter ego of Cartman's hand. In a way, this idea could definitely work since it subverts expectations, and that's pretty on brand for South Park, the previous installment of course concluding with an equally ludicrous battle. However, the confrontation with Mitch Connor is just so by the numbers, some players might not even realize that he's the final boss. For this reason, certain players will be watching the following cutscene oblivious that they have in fact just beaten the main campaign. Number 1. Skyrim. Not even 10 minutes into Skyrim, players are introduced to the biggest and baddest dragon in all the land, Alduin. After seeing this nefarious serpent lay waste to an entire village, it's easy to see why Alduin is known as the World Eater and the Harbinger of the Apocalypse. Everywhere you go, the NPCs speak of Alduin not as a dragon, but a god. As you're readying yourself to go toe-to-toe with the wicked wyvern, you should be armed to the teeth, leveled up all your skills, prepped your spells, and have a batch of healing items and buffs ready, cheese wheels included. However, vanquishing the almighty adversary is not as satisfying as it should be for a few different reasons. Firstly, he doesn't have any complex combat patterns which distinguish him as a final boss. If you faced him while roaming through the world, you'd safely assume he's just a regular dragon. Also, the brawl is so brief, there's no need to monitor your health or diversify your strategy. Weirdly, Alduin's death is also not followed by a cutscene or any kind of cinematic payoff. Once he's reduced to ash, the game just continues on as if you completed a random quest, barely acknowledging that you saved the world. Considering the amount of updates and patches Skyrim has received over the last decade, not to mention it's come out like 12 different times, it's surprising that Bethesda's never attempted to fix the ending to any degree.